Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering human creativity. I am Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Daniel Bernard Roumain, who is a composer, performer, educator, artist, activist, and also serves amongst a host of other capacities as the resident artistic catalyst of the New Jersey Symphony Orchestra, which we will talk about a little bit more. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Hey, always good to be with family, Aaron. Always good to be with you, my brother.
Totally. And of course, I derive immense and special joy and fulfillment having you on the show. I've been able to firsthand see your work, literally going back to the days when we were at the University of Michigan together. So,
Yeah, yes, yes.
that and see the extraordinary, talent and innovation that you brought back then, and then how you built that into the trajectory of really the unique artist that you are today. I'm excited to have you on the show because you fill so many of these different capacities. Obviously, you're a performing artist, but you also are an organizational leader, right? You lead kind of a lot of these efforts and innovate, bring new ideas to our field. And so we're going to talk about a few of those today. And especially with the New Jersey Symphony, one of our creative partners who helped us co-curate this show. So why don't we just start just there, because this terminology, resident artistic catalyst, I think a lot of our audience may not know kind of what does that mean? What does it mean to be the resident artistic catalyst? So if you can kind of share what that role is, because I think after you describe that, there may be other orchestras or artists who may want to emulate that or replicate that in their communities.
Sure. Well, always a pleasure to be with you on the show. I am part of leadership at different organizations, I would say it that way. My role at the New Jersey Symphony is multifaceted. And I think that word catalyst, which speaks directly to change, it speaks directly to, I think, inspiration. And I also think it speaks to the change that happens kind of unexpectedly, right? From a different perspective. So my role at the New Jersey Symphony involves working with the musicians, working with our conductor and music director in Jen Zhang, working with different schools, working with different corporations, actually, and also creating new work. Matter of fact, we'll be on a program together, which I'm looking forward to towards the end of our season. And but I think most importantly, as we are still coming out of a pandemic, and as we're still reevaluating our relationship to public health and our relationship to justice, and as we're thinking about these real days of war, I think one of my roles in everything that I'm doing is putting a focus on art, capital A, as resistance, but also art as healing, art as a way to understand and to cure what I think is going to be heavy days of conflict and division that we're already seeing, by the way, not only on our Oscar stages, right? But we're seeing it in our audiences. We're seeing it in our schools. And I do think that we can't be first responders as artists, but can't we be second or third?
Absolutely. No, it's so awesome. And I love how you often just kind of illustrate this role of an artist and the role of the arts, really.
Yeah.
And so for those out there in the audience who might be, at a particular orchestra or other arts organization in their community, and maybe they already have a resident composer, a composer in residence,
Sure.
how would you describe, and they're like, but you know what, we kind of want to go deeper. We like how you're describing that. How does that actually manifest? Like, are there any kind of key components that you would suggest? So when you think about this, here are these added components. It's not just creating, say, new work for the orchestra or for this artistic entity. It's also this. Like, what would you do to kind of help them to think about how they might structure something?
Well, you can think about the institution almost like a tree, right? So I talk a lot about institutional visioning. And one way to think about that is anywhere you're working, any organization that you're at, if you use the vision, or let's say, well, not the vision, but if you look at the organization as a tree, start to think about, well, what would be the roots? What would be the trunk of the tree, and what's the potential for the branches, even the leaves, right? So using that kind of thought, I think for most organizations, the roots and the tree and what's fundamental are clear. What's less clear is what's above. And what's even less clear than that is what's coming, the branches and the leaves. I think a resident artist catalyst can address any aspect of the organization that leadership is comfortable with. I think what's happened in the past, and where I hope we're moving past, is the notion of that artists can only be employed to look at artistic aesthetics or the artistic life of an organization. I look at budgets, and I have a lot to say about fiscal planning. Everywhere from, what's in the nuts and bolts of an insurance policy for our organization, to what's our relationship to staff and crew and local unions, what's in our collective bargaining agreement, right? So I think it has to do with leadership's ability to see artists as total, complete human beings who are dealing with the most complex issues in their own lives and oftentimes in other organizations. So looking up at those branches above, I think that artists can be employed not as artists, but as partners in the institutional vision for an organization. So let's look at budgets. Let's look at our relationship to community. Let's look at, of course, our relationship to diversity, equity, and inclusion. But let's talk about what is most wonderful and most severe, most dangerous, most problematic. What do you fear the most in your organization? At this time, there's a scarcity of funds. So I would say, just to give one brief example, if I were leading my own organization, I would immediately look to an artist who could help me with fiscal planning, who could help me find new ways of securing funding for my organization. And, this may be new and novel thought in a way, but I think it is a way to look at the years ahead for sure.
Awesome. No, I absolutely love that, and bringing so much more than just the musical or artistic creations. And I think ultimately, of course, that will impact how those artistic creations are delivered to audiences.
That's right.
How they're delivered and all that, which is amazing. So actually, can you kind of describe for us you'll be closing out the season. Can you share with us that work and what people have to look forward to?
Well, it's wonderful. I'm working on it right now. I'm caught between, as I mentioned before, I have a son who's 12 years old. And I said to him, we've shared so much already. We've gone through a pandemic together. We have gotten our vaccine shots together. We've been online a lot together. I never thought we would be in days of war together. And I think, I think this piece is already addressing this notion of diaspora, that border between Russia and those other border countries, Poland, Ukraine, of course. I'm thinking a lot about a 12-year-old son daughter, who up until a few days ago, everything seemed bright. You know, I'm sure they were in a home, in a bed that seemed safe. Remember when you were 10 years old and your bed was, the safest place in the world? Nothing could harm you there. And now that young child, hopefully holding the hand of their mother or grandmother, because dad is off to war, is now having to walk, run, and witness things that I would never want for my child, for any child, quite frankly. I think the piece, I know the piece speaks to that kind of mourning, but it also speaks to hope. And even in these days of war, I have hope that everything living bends towards the light, that resolution will come after the revolution, and that the work speaks to glory and, well, God, quite frankly.
It is unique times that we're in.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but curious, especially building off of that, I always like to ask my guests, these are some challenging times and people find them in very difficult circumstances. I'm sure you found yourself in some. When you're in those potentially darkest times, where do you turn for inspiration, for strength to draw upon?
Two places. I turn to music. As a musician, you'd be surprised how much I don't listen to music, right? Because I'm always making music. But two places. I turn to music, just listening, and listening with my whole body. Listening in the bathtub, listening in my bed, listening while I'm driving the car. Instead of watching something on Netflix, stopping and just really listening to music. Just last night, I was listening to Grammy Award winner Rhiannon Gibbons, and her voice, and your wonderful interview and conversation with her, which was so important to so many. The other place I look to are conversations with people I love. Conversations with people I love. I love my father. We loved our fathers. And then the people we love the most leave us. And hopefully they leave us prepared for their departure. So I am really mindful these days of calling or texting or emailing or being in conversation with the people that I love, and just listening and hearing and knowing that those conversations will end, but also knowing that those conversations will continue upon my transition.
Daniel?
Sorry, man. I got a little heavy right there.
Right?
You're a family, so.
Every time I talk with you, whether it's a formal interview or we're just hanging out, I find myself moved and inspired and thinking about the world in a little bit of a new way. So.
I'll end here with you, because I've been meaning to say this as a Black man to a Black man. I love you, brother.
Oh, man. I love you. I love you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, you could be on stage making jokes about me. I'm never going to come out.
Oh, Robin. Love you, Aaron. That was, woo.
Like we just, we'll figure things out in a different way. But no, the love is just so mutual. And I just have so much admiration and continue to always be in awe of the work that you do and the impact you have on our communities, on our craft, on our discipline, and on so many human beings. So Daniel Bernard Roumain, you truly are one of the arts engines who is transforming human creativity in our world. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.